Good morning. Welcome back. It's day three.
It's Friday.
Good morning to those of you coming in. Good to see you again. Good. And Dharmasara there. So yeah, we're on day three of this retreat exploring friendship. It's quite a lot of material and input in my group. We're really got quite a bit to talk about each day. It's very enjoyable. It's very sort of relevant material, isn't it? Friendships, how we connect to other people. It's sort of the stuff of life. I'm really enjoying gathering with my group. We're quite a small group. It's just myself, Dharmasara, Patrick, who lives here, and Jack, who I don't think I can see on the screen yet. Oh no, there he is. Yeah, good. And once again, I'm keen for you to sort of be able to imagine the people here. So once again, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 12, 13 people in the shrine room, a mixture of the men's and women's communities and the Dharma Life community. So this is our, maybe even, well, since I've been here, it's a bit of a first attempt at a kind of hybrid event of Bodhiketu's got to talk to the people in the room and the people on the screen. So we're working that out as it goes along. Okay, so it's gone 10:30. So I'm going to hand over to Bodhiketu. Bodhiketu lives here at Adhisthana, has done for 7 years. For 7 years. And Bodhiketu does a few things here, looks after the books, looks after the finances, not just of Adhisthana actually, but of a few different projects that sort of live at Adhisthana, as you were. Also, I've been enjoying recently, Bodhiketu's been saying, I do the finances, but I'm also experimenting with doing a bit of cooking. And so Bodhiketu, I think, is cooking 2 days for us this week. Yeah. He's pretty good, actually, pretty good at the cooking. A lovely sort of paneer thing you do sometimes. Very nice.
Today, that's tomorrow.
That's tomorrow. So we can all look forward to that tomorrow. Bodhiketu's sort of vegan paneer curry.
Yeah.
Bodhiketu's. I experienced Bodhiketu as a very good man. And you're talking this morning on communication. And what I like about Bodhiketu is I equally experience him as someone who's very quiet, but also really warm and friendly. And since I've moved here, he's definitely reached out to get to know me. So I love that mix of quiet and yet willing to reach out and befriend. So over to you, Bodhiketu.
Thank you very much. Yes, I really appreciate Shantikara's enthusiasm and warmth as well. Okay, so continuing on the subject of the duties of friendship, I'm going to be talking about the duties 3 and 4 today, which are holding your tongue and speaking out. I'm just going to give one presentation today, like Dharmarati did yesterday, not 2 separate ones. So I'm going to conflate the two, and that kind of makes sense because these two duties are obviously 2 sides of the same coin. Before I actually get into that, though, whenever I sort of find myself speaking about spiritual friendship, there's something I always find I want to say as almost like a preface to it. And that is that Kalyana Mitrata, or spiritual friendship, is not at root a social relationship. It's not. This is the way I don't tend to think of Kalyana Mitrata, or spiritual friendship, at root as a social relationship. I'm just going to unpack what I mean by that a bit. Friendship can come about through all sorts of different reasons. One may have shared interests with a friend. You may just spend a lot of time together. You may work together, and there may be a mutual liking. It may be that you're seeking friendship because you want someone to talk to, to overcome loneliness, to have a companion. There's all sorts of reasons why one might have a friend. And often those reasons, you may also have shared values. Often those reasons are social reasons. Um, and if you like, I sort of think of that as conventional friendship. Kalyana Mitrata, although it shares the same word, is distinct and different from that. Kalyana Mitrata is based on shared values. I just tell you, in my early days, one of my spiritual friends, he was a formal Kalyana Mitra to me. We didn't actually spend much time socially together. It was quite clear he had his group of friends, and I wasn't one of them in a way. He spent a lot of time with them. He didn't spend so much time with me. We worked together. When I needed him, he was always there. He gave sound advice, and he came from a perspective which I really valued. And he was definitely a Kalyana Mitra, spiritual friend, but I didn't spend much time socially with him. I mean, I was quite socially awkward and still am sometimes, but and so that was fine with me. I didn't really, I didn't really want that all that much. What I wanted from him was what he gave. But I think it's really important to bear in mind that, Kalyana Mitrata can be a friendship that includes spending a lot of time with people, it can be a lot of affection, and so on. It can include those things, but it doesn't need to, and it might not. So one's idea of what Kalyana Mitrata is, I think, is worth expanding. And I think Caroline mentioned this a bit last night, that sometimes your spiritual friendships can look a bit different, can be a bit more formal. They're based on, really primarily, Kalyana Mitra is based on shared values. And talking about speech and how we speak, those shared values are Buddhist values. And when we're considering speech and how we speak, the values we're looking at in terms of speech are elaborated in the 5 and then especially the 10 precepts. So in terms of speaking and Kalyana Mitrata, the shared values we're looking at in speech are abstaining from falsehood, harsh speech, frivolous speech, and slanderous speech, and cultivating speech that's truthful, kind, meaningful, and harmonious. So those are the values we're looking for. And it probably is quite clear to all of us that this is very much an art rather than a science. I mean, there's an awful lot of nuance within this area of how we speak. And part of that art includes knowing when to stay silent and when to speak. Sometimes it's better to be silent and to hold one's tongue. Sometimes it's necessary to speak out. So the first part, I'm going to be talking about restraint and holding one's tongue, not speaking out. When I first started meditating 20, 30 years ago, one of the things I immediately noticed was that it kind of created a sort of internal space for me, and I especially noticed that in terms of how I spoke and when I spoke. So it felt internally like the time between when someone spoke to me, or I had an experience, and when I responded to that experience, seemed to expand internally. I don't think it was a time thing necessarily, but somehow that awareness I developed within meditation created a space between initial stimulus and reaction. And that, I think, was really, really useful. It allowed me to respond in a more considered way. I'm aware that in this seminar we've crossed over a couple of religions at least, so I've got a Bible quote for you from the Christian Bible. I thought I'd give the Christians a little bit of a thing. So there's a saying which goes, words spoken rashly are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Proverbs 12:18. and obviously in the Dhammapada we've got when one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows like the wheel of the cart following the hoof of the ox. This is in Bante's translation. When one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows like the shadow that never departs. So one thing that I think is quite clear in terms of speech is that if one does speak immediately, one's speech is likely to reflect one's immediate inner state. So, an immediate comeback or an immediate response to a situation is likely to be flavoured, coloured by whatever state of mind one's currently in. If you're in an angry state, the immediate response, the immediate words will be flavoured by anger, probably. If you're in a grumbly state, complaint. If you're in a vague state, confusion, and so on. So, what that means, I think, is that often it's best to restrain a little bit. I mean, it may be that your inner state is more often positive. If your inner state is generally positive and loving and such like, one's words are likely to reflect that. And maybe restraint isn't quite so necessary. You can let it flow out in your words. But for many, when the inner state is darker, is let's say more unskillful, restraint is very, very useful quality to have. And one needs to take care with one's speech. I mean, going a long way towards silence, one of the things I've often experienced on silent retreats, meditation retreats, actually, is that I found that I can get to know people quite well during silence. That I've actually developed friendships through long periods of silence. And I've had some quite extreme experiences of this on silent meditation retreats, where there'll be someone on the retreat who I don't know, and maybe I don't even know their name, apart from maybe it's just written on the list of who's on the retreat. And we'll go through a 10-day, 2-week period. And in the shrine room, especially if I'm sitting near them or opposite them, I'll have taken them in a lot. I'll have seen their various responses that are sometimes on their face, or an atmosphere around. I'll see how they move, I'll see how they're eating, what they're like. I'll start to feel like I get to know them in a way which has quite a lot of depth to it. And I had the experience where, more than once, where someone's reciprocated in the same way. And when you start speaking again, it almost seems like you lose that depth. That you sort of rise to a surface. There's a lot of words, but you don't get to that depth. And I've actually, I've made genuine friendships during that. So I definitely really value that. Sometimes I do think we can speak a bit much, and that space, taking someone in quiet, can really foster this connection between people. Obviously, this isn't what we do in most of our lives. There's a whole range of different issues and situations where speech and friendship and connection are very closely related. And in the text, there's a whole range of different areas which are explored in terms of speech. Whether to mention someone's faults or not. It says, refrain from someone mentioning someone's faults, don't dispute with them, preserve their confidences, and so on. I found when I was reading some of this text that some of it I could go along with, and some I would think, well, it's actually nuanced. And when you go into the text, it obviously is, it's more nuanced than that. And maybe partly because it's drawn from a different tradition. One can't completely buy into some of the recommendations. I mean, whether to mention someone's faults or not, well, yes, but I could also imagine situations where it's useful to do that. Don't dispute or argue. Obviously, frivolously, no, and habitually, no, but there are nuances within that. When you're looking at this maybe in the groups, I mean, you can look at all of these different areas and remember that the quality or the values that we're trying to bring to each of these different areas are the Buddhist ones, trying to refrain from false, harsh, frivolous, slanderous speech, trying to cultivate speech that is kindly and truthful, and speech that is meaningful and brings harmony. That's what we're always trying to do. We're trying to sort of build that connection, build that depth of Kalyana Mitrata. It's serving those values, and also it's serving the, if you like, the objective of awakening for yourself and others. That's what your speech, you're developing these relationships is always trying to serve. There were a couple of areas highlighted which I did want to just touch on. One is about preserving confidences, and one is about complaint, criticism of someone in their absence. So when someone tells you something in confidence, they're doing so because they find it valuable to be able to communicate in that way to you. They may come to a better understanding by doing that with you, but also in doing so, they open themselves up in terms of vulnerability, weakness, and you need to bear in mind that if you were to break that confidence, it may put them in a difficult position, it may embarrass them, it may harm them or damage them. That's not to say one won't always, find reasons why sometimes one has to pass a confidence along. There may be reasons one does that. One has to be careful about it, though. Make sure you're not doing it just for something that is self-referential. One of the areas which I've fallen foul of in this is, and this is one of the nuances in this area, is passing on a confidence in confidence. So someone tells me something in confidence, and I might sort of pass it on and say, well, I want to tell you this about someone, but keep it in confidence because they told it to me in confidence. That's not keeping confidence. That's extending the range of who now has the information. There may be a good reason you do that, but again, care has to be taken. Really, quite scrupulous care has to be taken about that. The other area is, and I like this one. Often it's very easy to complain about people when they're not there and criticize people when they're not there. And I think that generally speaking, one wants to try and not say things in people's absence that you wouldn't say when they're present. It's much better to have that sort of openness and transparency. There may be times when you do that. Again, there may be times when you feel it necessary to point out someone's weakness when they're not present. And there may be a good reason for that, but obviously care needs to be taken. And again, it's all at the service of these values of speech, actually you are trying to, always trying to get a sense of, is this for the benefit of the person I'm actually talking about? Is it for their benefit? Okay, so there's a few things about holding one's tongue and restraint. When I get in terms of speaking out, I wanted to tell a couple of stories just to kick us off. The first one was it was in a big community I was in Manchester in the 90s. There were 12 of us living together in a community in Chorlton. And obviously at the dinner table, there could be a lot of joking and frivolous speech and noise and all that sort of stuff. And at a certain point we decided, and we made this decision, that at the dinner table we weren't going to speak about anything unless it was the Dharma. That's what we decided. And you can probably imagine what happened. We ate in silence. No one said anything. Second story. There's a friend of mine on my ordination retreat. He was someone who was he was a very lovable character, delightful. He was very extroverted. He was also very willful, and he decided, without any advice from anyone else, that he was just going to maintain much more inner silence. He was not going to speak out in any reactive way. That's what he decided. Within 2 days, he basically said, I'm just going to explode if I don't say something. He just could not. He just said, I'm going to explode. That's what he said. And his preceptor said, yeah, I'd never advised you to take that precept. It's just not you. You can't do it. I mean, I think he was looking at like myself and someone else. I'm very much an introvert. And I find that, I mean, not always, but very often I can take an experience or what someone says, reflect on it internally, resolve it, not speak about it, move on. This is possible for me in many areas. Not always, sometimes I do have to speak, but I'm on that side of things. And I recognize that not everyone is on that side of things. So I have to be careful when I talk about holding one's tongue in silence, knowing that it's something that I will do quite readily. For some people, they have to speak out much earlier in any process, and this can be quite messy and untidy. Sadnandi says that the spiritual life of the extrovert is one of perpetual humiliation. And I know what she means, because for some people, you have to speak out earlier in the process, and it can be very, very messy and untidy, and often has to involve a lot of clearing up the mess afterwards. So I suppose the art you have to master in that situation is how you manage the consequences of your speech. Restraining as you can, talking things through with care, and managing the mess when it happens, so confessing and so on. The danger for introverts, for us, is that we can, things can fester. You don't say it, you keep it to yourself, you try to pretend you've resolved it, it festers. Yeah, that has consequences. You cut yourself off from people. It's another danger. So often when we're talking about these sorts of precepts that are suggested within the text, what I think of is, well, sometimes you take these precepts on in order to counteract a tendency within yourself. So you may say, okay, well, I'm not going to complain about this person. I'm not going to do it in any situation. I'm always going to rejoice in their merits whenever I can. You're trying to sort of do something which takes you out of your comfort zone. And it's very useful to do those things, but it's important to do those things. Often you do it within a time frame. You do it in consultation with friends. You're doing it with conscious awareness of what you're trying to work on and what you're trying to cultivate. And sometimes you might find that you for a while you do things in a stilted way because you're taking on precepts like that, and I think that's okay. And then at times you may relax back from that, find that some of what you've learned has been naturally taken on, some of it doesn't fit quite so well, and you gradually develop in that way. It is very much a path of sort of experimentation, and a lot of the speech stuff is very, very personal. But again, remember, in all of these things, what we're trying to serve is, well, the cultivation of awakening, the cultivation of bodhicitta, developing speech that's truthful, kind, harmonious, and meaningful. That's what we're trying to do. But it is nuanced, and within, even within those four sort of qualities. I mean, one of the ones that comes to me, I talk with a friend of mine quite a bit about it, is this conflict that quite often happens between truth and harmony. There's the introvert-extrovert thing. Truth and harmony is another one, where some people, truth is of much higher value. And, if you're fudging the truth a little bit to sort of make people feel happier, basically you're lying. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got those who value harmony much more, that really you're thinking, well, what is the outcome you're hoping for in this speech? If you just speak truthfully and that person reacts, well, that's not really what you're that's not the outcome you're intending. So you're trying to find a way for what you say to land well with them. Both of these have, if you like, it's, I suppose, strengths and weaknesses, if you like. I tend to be slightly more towards the harmony side of things myself. Okay, so again, with the text, there's quite a number of areas of speech which are highlighted, and all of these we're trying to sort of bring these Buddhist qualities to. There's a few things I want to just mention. Top of the list is, I would say, rejoicing in merit. Expressing, I can't remember how it puts it in the text, but where you see the qualities of your friend, you mention it. Everybody likes having their merits rejoiced in. Everyone likes that. Sometimes they say they don't, but they do. Sometimes they feel a bit embarrassed, but they still like it. It's rare that someone doesn't actually quite enjoy it. It creates a good sense of connection. It really does develop connection. But there's also rejoicing in merit and rejoicing in merit. You can say, I like that jumper you're wearing, or I like the fact you did that. That was very good, and that's great. But where I think rejoicing merit can really shine is where you've given it some thought, and it's where you've seen something a bit deeper in someone, and you mention it. Sometimes that can really have a very, very positive effect on your connection with someone. You've seen them a bit more deeply. I would say that almost always rejoicing in merit is a positive. And in this way, real communication can foster depth and a sort of understanding and appreciation of another person. There was something in the text about expressing. It's almost like expressing anything. But I told my wrath did end. Again, one has to be careful about how one communicates in that way. If you are communication of strong negative emotions has to be done with care, I think. That might just be my harmonious side speaking. But I think you can do damage. But it can also really deepen a spiritual friendship. I also like this area very much of, there's something in there about defending a friend in their absence, which you may or may not do, but the way I like to put it or think of it is that you always hold your friend's interests when they're not there. So you maintain your friend's interest when they're not there. So you look out for them, basically. And in their absence, you will bear them in mind and think, well, we're not going to just do this because my friend's here and not here, and we need to bear this in mind. So that is a wonderful, it's a deepening of the friendship. And also, as with many of these things, it's a sort of stepping over into someone else's world. The final area, which I think, again, is an area you could spend a lot of time looking at, is speaking out in terms of advice and feedback, giving appropriate advice. I know that in the early days of the movement, there was this idea of fierce friendship, and sometimes it had a beneficial effect, and sometimes it didn't. What I find nowadays is that people are much more reticent to give advice and feedback. In the last couple of years, I've been through a couple of quite deep and intensive processes of feedback, one around the precepting review and one within the community. And with one or two people, I went into especially the precepting one. I said, look, really, I respect all of the people who I asked to give me feedback. I really respected. They knew me well, and I wanted them to give me everything. Really think about it and give me everything. And I think that feedback and advice, when it's well thought through from someone who knows you well, who has a perspective, is like gold. It really is like gold. There is that verse in the Dhammapada where it talks about treating that sort of feedback like buried treasure. People can give you a perspective on yourself which you would never in 100 years actually be able to see on your own. In your own, it's one of the real benefits of spiritual friendship, and you can do that for other people as well. But one has to do it with care. It's not just about getting something off your chest. It's certainly not about giving them feedback about something that irritates you. There's a story I'd kind of want to finish up with, which I don't know. I think it almost just beautifully encapsulates this situation. I remember one time back in Manchester, I was in a chapter. Two of my spiritual friends were in that chapter, my former Kalyana Mitras, and one of the guys in the chapter reported in some distress about something. I can't remember what it was. And we all just went round, and bit by bit, we each gave him a little nugget of advice or a little bit of something we thought would help him, with this issue. And then the last person to speak was my spiritual friend. He said, that was really interesting. You just gave him a bit of advice, which is what you needed to work on. You gave him some advice, which is what you needed to work on. You did the same, and you did the same. And we'd all done it, including me. It was obvious when he said it. He didn't give any advice himself. And I really took that to heart. I thought it was very, very telling. I'm not going to say any more about that, because I think it just encapsulates what one can do. Okay, so this is pretty much all I want to say. You've got a bit of time. There's a lot of material in there for you to explore. I hope there's some nice little nuggets in there for you to explore. I've talked about, just to conclude, Kalyana Mitrata, which I think is a different type of relationship than friendship. I've talked about the shared values in speech, which we're looking to cultivate: truthfulness, kindness, meaningful speech, and harmonious speech. The value of silence and restraint, how meditation and the meditative space can support that, how we can develop connection through silence, and then we looked at a couple of issues out of the text, but then speaking out as well. It's not just trying to keep silent. There's also the need to speak out, and how that can also develop friendship. And then looked at a number of areas in relation to that. Okay, all done.